60%. I really want you to just sit with that number for a second.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Right. I mean, imagine dedicating years of your life to studying global markets. You're learning the intricacies of international trade law. You're, analyzing the major stock exchanges.
Right, mastering the supply chain contract.
Exactly. Memorizing all these compliance metrics.
Yeah.
You graduate or you step into the boardroom and you feel absolutely ready to navigate the global economy.
Oh, totally. You think you have the map.
Right. And then you look at the raw data and realize something incredibly jarring. More than half of all the human beings working on planet Earth right now are entirely invisible to that standardized corporate world.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. Like, everything you learned only covers a fraction of the actual picture. You're basically just looking at the tip of the iceberg.
It is arguably the single largest blind spot in modern business education today.
Yeah, for sure.
We're aggressively taught that success in global trade comes strictly from following official rules, right? Utilizing registered banks, working within these really rigid, formal frameworks.
Right, the official channel.
Exactly. But out there on the ground, that is simply not the reality for the vast majority of commerce.
So, okay, let's unpack this, because today we are diving deep into that unseen infrastructure. We're exploring a fascinating analysis of the informal economy.
Such a great source.
Yeah, we're specifically looking at this article titled The Shadow in the Sun, The Informal Economy Impact for Global Business. And the author, Anita L. Hummel, has spent over 2 decades operating on the ground in Southeast Asia, mostly in Hanoi, Vietnam.
Right.
And the central premise we're unpacking today for you is that if you ignore this massive hidden economy, you aren't actually engaging in international business. The author says you're just being a corporate tourist.
Oh, man, corporate tourist is such a sharp critique. I love that term.
It really hits hard, doesn't it?
It does, because it describes that exact phenomenon where, like, a Western executive walks through a bustling foreign market with, a clipboard or a spreadsheet.
Looking completely out of place.
Totally. And they completely miss the actual heartbeat and the mechanics of the place. I mean, they see the surface level culture, but they don't understand the underlying engines that drive the daily survival and trade of the local population.
Right. Because to understand why we're missing half the picture, we first have to define what this hidden world actually looks like when you step away from the boardroom or Wall Street.
Yeah, you have to get out of the high rises.
Exactly. So this ecosystem goes by a few different names. You'll hear the shadow economy, the street economy, and perhaps the most accurate one, System D.
System D is such a brilliant term.
Where does that actually come from?
So it originated in French-speaking Africa. It's derived from the French word débrouillardise.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that essentially refers to the ability to be resourceful, right? To untangle problems and figure things out entirely on your own.
Like completely outside the official sanctioned systems.
Exactly. It's the ultimate DIY autonomy.
I love that. So let's look at the core characteristics of System D.
Yeah.
The defining features are quite clear. It's largely cash-based, it's unbanked, untaxed, and it operates basically without government oversight or official commercial licenses.
Right.
Now, sitting in a corporate office, that list of traits sounds like the literal textbook definition of a black market.
Oh, absolutely. And that is the very first and probably the most dangerous assumption we need to dismantle here.
Okay, let's dismantle it.
Because when people hear unregulated or, shadow market, the mind instantly pivots to illicit activities, cartels, smuggling, rings, money laundering.
Or bad stuff.
Right, the criminal element.
Huh?
But the reality is that unregulated does not inherently mean criminal.
That's a really important distinction.
It's massive. The overwhelming majority of System D is made up of entirely honest, hardworking, small-scale entrepreneurs. They're simply trying to make a living, but doing so outside of the heavy bureaucratic framework.
Yeah, the analysis provides some really vivid examples of who these people actually are. We're talking about the street vendor in Jakarta who's been selling food from the exact same cart for a decade.
Right, or a textile weaver in Accra operating right out of their home without an official commercial license.
Yeah, or artisan groups in rural Vietnam who are handcrafting these incredibly complex goods using, ancestral skills, but they have absolutely zero corporate paperwork filed with the state.
Exactly. These aren't criminal syndicates trying to undermine the government. They are the fundamental structural building blocks of daily life and commerce in these regions.
Right. They're the backbone. But I do have to challenge one of the premises here, actually.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Because alongside the vendor in Jakarta and the weaver in Accra, The analysis also includes a freelance programmer in Utah operating in the gig economy.
Right, the gig worker.
Yeah, and I have to push back on that comparison. Like, are we really saying that a tech freelancer in Utah is operating in the exact same economic universe as a rural artisan in Vietnam?
It's a fair question.
I mean, a freelance developer might be bypassing a standard W-2 employment contract, sure, but they likely have a bank account. They use high-speed Wi-Fi. They definitely file taxes at the end of the year.
Ideally, yeah.
Right. They aren't unbanked and untaxed like the vendor in Jakarta. So how does that even fit into System D?
Well, that is a crucial distinction, and it gets to the heart of what the informal economy actually is, because the Utah freelancer represents the intersection or, the gray area between the formal and the informal.
Okay, the gray area.
Yeah. You're correct that they're banked, but the core similarity, the connective tissue between the programmer and the weaver is the deliberate bypass of traditional regulated safety nets.
Oh, I see.
Right. The freelancer is operating outside the standard corporate employment structure. They have no employer-sponsored health care, no formal severance protections, no 401k matching.
They're on their own.
Exactly. They rely entirely on independent gig-based networks to generate income. What's fascinating here is that System D isn't just a monolith. It's a spectrum.
A spectrum, right.
It ranges from the completely untaxed cash economy of a rural market all the way up to the gig worker who uses formal digital infrastructure but operates fundamentally outside traditional corporate safety nets.
Okay, so it's less about the technology they're using and much more about the friction of the formal system that they're actively trying to avoid.
Yes, exactly.
Let's talk about that friction.
Yeah.
Because, sitting in an air-conditioned corporate office, formalizing a business just means filing a few PDF forms online and paying a small fee.
Right. It takes 10 minutes.
Exactly. So what does friction actually look like for someone operating in the informal economy in the developing world?
Oh, it is a completely different universe of administrative burden. I mean, imagine trying to register a small textile business in an emerging market.
Okay.
You might have to physically travel to 5 different municipal offices across the city.
Just to get the paperwork.
Yeah. And you might have to pay unofficial expediting fees, which is just a polite word for bribes at every single stop. You have to wait months for approval, during which you cannot legally operate. And then once you finally are formalized, you're hit with tax burdens that your tiny micro-profit margins simply cannot support.
And zoning regulations, probably.
Oh, constantly. Zoning regulations that require infrastructure you just don't possess. The formal system is entirely too heavy for them to carry.
The math simply doesn't work for them at all.
Not even close.
And that leads us to the sheer scale of this phenomenon. I mean, this isn't some niche sociological quirk that we're talking about. The data from institutions like the International Labor Organization, the IMF, the World Bank, it's staggering.
It really is.
Like we mentioned at the top, 60% of the world's workers are operating in this informal economy right now.
Yeah, and what's wild is that in developing nations, that number skyrockets up to 90% of the workforce.
90%.
90%. Economically speaking, this shadow system generates somewhere between 15 to 25% of the entire global GDP.
Up to a quarter of the world's wealth is moving completely under the radar.
It's massive.
Which brings us to a huge contradiction and really the core mystery of this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
If this economy is so enormous, if it employs the majority of the human race and moves trillions of dollars, why hasn't it been absorbed by the formal market?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. For decades, economists assumed this was just a developmental waiting room. The assumption was, if countries just built more corporate infrastructure and attracted more foreign investment, everyone would eventually get a badge, a cubicle, and a formalized job.
Right. That is known academically as the dualist theory.
The dualist theory, okay.
Yeah, and it views the informal economy purely as a symptom of slow corporate growth. The idea is that people are just hanging out in the shadows until a real job opens up in the formal sector.
But looking at the data, especially from the author's experience in economies like Vietnam, that assumption completely falls apart.
Entirely.
The street economy isn't shrinking as the formal economy grows. It's actually expanding right alongside it. It isn't a waiting room at all.
No, it's not. Which brings us to the more cynical, but honestly far more accurate reality.
Okay, let's hear it.
The formal and informal economies aren't competing, they are collaborating. This is known as the structuralist perspective.
So they're connected.
Very deeply. The shiny, regulated corporate tower doesn't actually want the informal sector to disappear because they secretly rely on that cheap, unregulated labor to keep their own profit margins high.
Wait, I have to push back on that for a second.
Okay.
We live in an era where massive publicly traded corporations are intensely scrutinized. Like, we have strict environmental, social, and governance standards, ESG.
Sure do.
We have relentless supply chain compliance audits. If a Fortune 500 company is actively relying on unregulated, unregistered workshops, how are they not triggering catastrophic legal and PR liabilities every single day?
Because they avoid it through the architecture of the modern supply chain.
What do you mean?
So the formal multinational corporation rarely contracts directly with the unregulated workshop. They contract with a massive, perfectly compliant primary supplier.
Ah, okay, the middleman.
Exactly. And that primary supplier passes all the international audits with flying colors. But then, that primary supplier subcontracts a portion of the work to a regional firm.
Right.
Who then subcontracts to a local village broker, who then distributes the actual raw materials to individual unregistered households to physically assemble the products.
Wow.
Yeah. By the time the labor actually reaches System D, it is 4 layers deep.
So it's totally hidden.
Exactly. The formal sector reaps the absolute benefit of low-cost, highly flexible labor while maintaining perfect, plausible deniability.
So the formal economy is quietly using the informal economy as its foundation. Yeah. I mean, it really is the engine room of global trade.
It absolutely is.
But what about the workers and the micro-entrepreneurs themselves? Are they just trapped at the bottom of this massive subcontracting cascade?
Not necessarily. And that's the third dimension we really have to consider here. The economist Hernando de Soto popularized what's called the legalist theory. He argues we need to stop looking at people in the informal economy as just victims of a slow-growing system, or merely as, exploited cogs in a corporate supply chain.
Right, giving them some agency.
Exactly. This raises an important question. Why do they stay? He points out that these are brilliant, highly adaptable entrepreneurs who are making a highly rational choice.
Rational how?
Well, they look at the broken, corrupt, or overly bureaucratic formal systems in their countries, and they make the logical, mathematical decision to stay in the shadows.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They realize that they can operate more efficiently and serve their communities better by relying on their own social networks rather than the state.
They're actively choosing trust over contracts.
Yes, precisely.
And that right there is the pivot point for you, the listener. If this informal economy is permanent, if it's a massive rational force deeply woven into global trade, then how do you actually do business within it?
Right. How do you navigate it practically?
Exactly. And the analysis shares a very specific real-world application from a company called Mondoro, which sources lacquerware and home goods from rural Vietnam.
Yes, I love this part. This brings all of these macroeconomic theories right down to the ground level of daily business operations.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a buyer for a moment.
Okay.
You're navigating this market. You find an artisan family in rural Vietnam with incredible ancestral skills in crafting lacquerware.
Beautiful stuff.
Right. Now, in the formal economy, the next steps are totally obvious. You draw up a vendor agreement, you establish net 30 payment terms through a corporate bank, you set up a quality control audit schedule, and you have your legal team review the liability clauses.
Standard operating procedure.
Exactly. But in System D, as Mondoro experiences, none of that exists.
Not a single piece of it.
You cannot run a standard credit check. There is no corporate entity to even sign a contract with.
Yeah.
So how do you actually execute the trade? Like, how do you vet a supplier when their incorporation document is basically just their reputation in the village?
It's wild, right? You have to completely shift your paradigm and rely entirely on the community network.
How so?
Think of it conceptually like open source software.
Oh, interesting analogy.
Yeah. In open source development, there is no central corporate owner, right? And often no direct legal penalty for writing a bad line of code. Yet complex operating systems function smoothly because the community self-polices.
Oh, I see.
If a developer pushes malicious or sloppy code, their reputation within the developer community is destroyed.
And no one works with them again?
Exactly. System D operates on the exact same mechanism of peer accountability. If an artisan family delivers a terrible batch of lacquerware to a buyer, they don't get sued for breach of contract.
Because there is no contract.
Right. Instead, they lose their standing in the local network. Word spreads, and that loss of reputation cuts them off from future capital, future raw materials, and future partnerships.
It's like walking a high-stakes tightrope without a safety net. The social capital literally is the collateral.
Exactly.
But what about the actual financial transactions? I mean, without standard corporate banking, how are secure payments handled in an environment that is almost entirely cash-based?
Yeah, so it relies on decentralized networks of trust and highly specific milestone agreements.
Milestone agreements.
Yeah, you don't operate on standard 90-day payment terms after delivery like you would in the West. Instead, the buyer might provide the physical raw materials up front as an initial investment.
Okay.
Then, cash payments are tied to highly observable physical progress.
Like checking in on the work.
Right. You pay a certain percentage when the base forms are carved. You pay another percentage when the first layer of lacquer is applied.
So it's step by step.
Exactly. The payment schedule is intimately tied to physical milestones, and it's often verified by long-standing relationships with community elders or trusted local brokers who basically act as the informal guarantors of the deal.
It is such an incredibly intricate dance, and I feel like it highlights exactly why current business education is fundamentally failing students by just, pretending this environment doesn't exist.
Oh, it's a huge disservice to students.
Right. Because if you drop a newly minted MBA into that village and their only tool is a standardized procurement contract, they are going to fail completely.
Without question. I mean, the curriculums are teaching students how to manage compliance, but they aren't teaching them how to navigate trust.
Wow. Yeah.
Future business leaders really need to develop an entirely new set of competencies. They need to understand how to ethically source products from workshops that don't generate official paperwork.
Right.
They need to grasp the mechanics of secure alternative payment networks. And crucially, they need to figure out how to help these micro-entrepreneurs slowly scale and interact with global markets without just crushing them under sudden bureaucratic weight.
That feels like the ultimate tightrope walk. You want to bring their incredible products to the global stage. But the moment you force them to adopt formal corporate overhead, you destroy the very agility and cost-effectiveness that made them successful in the first place.
Precisely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture for anyone involved in international trade, ignoring the informal economy doesn't just mean you're missing out on potential profits.
What else does it mean?
It means you're suffering from a severe lack of cultural intelligence. You're failing at basic supply chain risk assessment because you don't actually fully grasp the origin point of your own products.
You don't know where they're actually coming from.
Exactly. And perhaps most dangerously, you are entirely blind to the resilience of these shadow markets.
Oh, resilience is a great point.
Yeah, because data consistently shows that during major economic crises or natural disasters, when formal banking institutions and corporate supply chains just freeze or collapse entirely, System D often survives and adapts.
Because it's inherently decentralized. It doesn't rely on a single point of failure like a centralized bank or a massive corporate logistics hub.
Exactly.
If one route is blocked, the network just immediately reroutes based on local knowledge and cash flow.
It's incredibly fluid.
Okay, let's synthesize all of this. The informal economy System D, the shadow market, whatever you want to call it, is not a fringe issue. It is not a developmental delay just waiting to be solved by a few more regulations.
No.
It is a vibrant, permanent, and highly complex engine that is driving a massive portion of global trade today. And as the analysis points out, it has both sunshine and shadow.
Yeah, the title really nails it.
It does.
Yeah.
The sunshine is the incredible creativity, the relentless adaptability, and the pure survival instincts of these entrepreneurs. But the shadow is the inherent vulnerability, right? The lack of legal protection against bad actors, the limited access to large-scale capital, and the systemic barriers that keep these brilliant makers from fully protecting their intellectual property on the global stage.
It's a very delicate ecosystem. And the companies that operate successfully in this space are the ones actively working to bridge that gap.
Right, finding the middle ground.
Yeah, they're building stable, ethical relationships that honor the operational realities of the makers while still satisfying the quality requirements of global buyers. But looking at the sheer scale of this, there's a much larger philosophical question that we have to ask ourselves.
I knew you wouldn't let us leave without a broader implication. So what is the final takeaway here?
Think about the numbers we started with. If mutual trust, personal reputation, and tight-knit social networks are currently running a decentralized shadow system that successfully generates up to 25% of the global GDP.
Yeah.
What does that actually say about our modern corporate world? We are absolutely obsessed with endless legal contracts, compliance audits, liability shields, bureaucratic red tape. Are we vastly overcomplicating global trade?
That's a fascinating perspective.
Right. Instead of just trying to force the street vendor or the rural artisan to act like a rigid corporation, could the formal economy actually learn a thing or two about agility, resilience, and genuine human trust from System D?
That is a phenomenal question. Maybe the boardroom actually needs to take a lesson from the village market.
I think so.
And that is the thought we really want to leave you with today. As you look at the products around your home, or as you analyze your own business strategies, ask yourself, how much of your operation relies entirely on the artificial safety net of paperwork, and how much is built on actual, resilient human trust?
Something to really mull over.
Definitely. Well, we want to thank you for joining us on this journey today. If you want to become part of the community and keep exploring these vital, under-the-radar topics with us, make sure you subscribe to our podcast.
Yes, please do.
Also, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel for incredible visual content. Sign up for the newsletter so you never miss an update. And absolutely check out our blog for more great information, analysis, and stories about navigating the complexities of our global market.
Lots of great deep dives on the blog.
For sure. Because remember, if you are only looking at the standardized contracts and the official stock exchanges, you are only seeing a fraction of how the world actually works.
That's right.
To truly understand the global engine, you have to be willing to explore the shadow to find the rest of the picture.
Well said.
See you next time.